have to pay child support when she is the one that got pregnant. It just doesn't make
David,
any
we're
sense.
on.
What?
We're on.
Oh, crap.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Hoops HD report here on Monday, the last day of November. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. Joining us, part of the normal crowd. First of all, we got David Griggs down there trying to avoid some legal issues. John Teitel back with us again. John, how you doing there?
I'm doing a lot better than the LSU Tigers, my friend.
Oh, boy, we're going to get into that in a minute here also. And joining us, I think, for the first time this season, and actually in quite a while, Lee Del Vecchio back again. Lee, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I can't remember ever being referred to as normal crowd. In fact, are you feeling okay, would be my first question.
I said part of the normal crowd.
Fair enough. No, I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about what was a very busy week in which UConn played no games that we need to discuss.
And we're going to get right into it, but before we actually get to the games, there's a few pieces of news that came out this week, and actually we'll start with a sad note where Guy Lewis, longtime coach of the Houston Cougars, coached the Phi Slamma Jamma teams back in the 80s, including in that incredible 83 championship game against NC State, did pass away this week. He was really one of the great coaches back in that era. I know a lot of people out there probably don't remember him as much anymore, but
he was, and it was really sad, and I think that he was important to college basketball becoming a popular sport. He kind of engineered, first of all, the game in the Astrodome against UCLA, which was the first primetime game that was aired coast to coast. It got huge ratings. It was basically a showcase moment for college basketball at a time where they didn't really have much. And then 15 years later, he was coaching what was, the UNLV, the Fab Five of its day, the Phi Slamma Jamma team, which was a huge national phenomenon. So he did a lot more to boost the popularity of the sport than what he probably gets credit for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John T. I mean, he was a back-to-back national championships games there, 83 and 84, lost them both, unfortunately. The NC State game goes down as, ending with either the worst shot or the greatest pass or the worst shot in history of basketball, right?
I'll note it as the greatest pass. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Jim Perry, who was one of Coach Lewis's former players. He was co-captain of the 77 team that was runner-up in the NIT. He had talked about more off-the-court stuff in terms of, I don't think a big part of Lewis's legacy is known, but in fact, he was one of the first major college coaches anywhere in the South who recruited African-American players. Two of his most famous ones, of course, Elvin Hayes, the Hall of Famer, and Don Chaney, the player and later coach. So that deserves to be a big part of the Lewis legacy.
Yeah, and Guy Lewis is a coach who always, I thought, got kind of the short end of the stick, and I think maybe as years have gone on, that's changed as we've departed from those days. It becomes more amazing the fact that Houston was once a national powerhouse. I mean, it gets more incredible as the years go by. But, in that title game, a lot of people blame the fact that, they were a bad foul shooting team. But the truth is, Guy Lewis, for the last 8 minutes of that game, he tried to play a slowdown game, an era before the shot clock, which is exactly what everyone else did. But for some reason, it became, Guy Lewis's fault that his players couldn't shoot free throws. But I think as the years went on and as Houston really fell on incredibly hard times and has struggled to even be they're a program that gets to the tournament maybe a couple times a decade, but under Guy Lewis, they were one of the 5 best programs in the country, and he was one of the first coaches to, as was mentioned by David, to really embrace the idea of college basketball as a national sport. And I think he has, in terms of popularizing the game, no coach did more in the 60s, 70s, and 80s than he did. Can you think of a more entertaining basketball team to watch that you've ever seen than a YouTube clip of that Phi Slamma Jamma team? Yeah. It's incredible. And that pre-shot clock era, that was back when Dean Smith was trying to win games 35-33. But they came up 2 points short of a national championship, so he gets forgotten in the way that our society works. But was a legendary coach and a real pioneer in the game of college basketball and will be greatly missed.
A couple of pieces of news came out this week. First of all, we talked the last several weeks about Diallo not getting cleared by the NCAA. Finally, they did clear him as of last Wednesday afternoon, right before their last game out in out in Maui before Vanderbilt, but they conveniently threw in a 5-game suspension so that to kind of, in my opinion, I think the NCAA kind of just covered up the fact that they were completely inept in dealing with this thing by saying, oh, well, he would have had a 5-game suspension anyhow, so they didn't miss anything. Was this a joke by the NCAA, or am I reading too much into it?
Well, the NCAA is a joke sometimes. So this was ridiculous. Well, okay, say it was a legitimate 5-game suspension. It should not have taken this long to decide that and hand it down. So even though it's very suspicious, even if it was totally legit, it was still ridiculous. How does it take that long to make what really shouldn't be that hard of a decision? That's outrageous.
In the NCAA, you are guilty until proven innocent, is the way that their mentality works on all these investigations. There's no reason this should ever have taken this long or been an issue. They botched these. I was only upset with how, and you guys all know because you follow smaller schools, like, because it was Kansas, it became a thing. Now, the NCAA has been doing this for years with similarly obviously eligible players. And it was a little upsetting to hear people acting like this was some sort of unique scenario. The problem is this is what always happens with all sorts of schools. This happens at Eastern Washington's level and at Kansas's level, and it's a joke in every case.
Is there something that needs to be done here, John T., or is it just that the NCAA needs more people, or that
that would help?
Or, I mean, it's
yeah. I mean, if they can fork over $10 million to hire a bunch of new investigators and all the latest technology, and if everyone would comply with their investigation, I'm sure we could do these things a lot quicker. That being said, this is a real world, and things don't always work that quickly. And I don't want to reward people for doing things late in the year so that it forces the NCAA's hand. Why should somebody, for example, if they do something in August versus April, it's too much of a rush that the NCAA can't clear the one but can clear the other? And I don't say this phrase a lot, but in the defense of the NCAA, I know. They did rule that he accepted a small amount of improper benefits, so it's not like they were out to get him per se. I don't see a big controversy. I mean, he was ruled to have accepted improper benefits, even if it was a candy bar or whatever. He did something wrong.
Well, I just thought it was kind of convenient that the NCAA gives him a 5-game suspension right after they just played 4 games, and on the day of their 5th, which there was no way he would have played because he hadn't practiced anyhow. And I think Bill Self kind of came out and said that he probably wouldn't have played that game.
No, Chad, that was just a coincidence. Come on.
Oh, okay, just a coincidence. But
Let's
move on to another NCAA rule that needs a little bit of work here, and that's what's going on here at Utah State, where David Collette, on the eve of the season, literally right before the first game of the season, comes out and says, I'm transferring, I'm not going to play for you this season. This kid was the best player on the team last year. Now, I thought this was a good Utah State team heading into the season. I don't think so anymore without him. But now, all of a sudden, Utah State turns around and says, okay, you don't want to play for us? Well, we're not going to allow you to transfer anywhere. That's it. And the way it works is that a player, if he's not released by the school he's with, cannot get a scholarship at another school. He can go and walk on somewhere else, but he cannot receive a scholarship anywhere else. And the word behind the scenes is that Utah State is suspicious that there was tampering involved here, but still, the kid doesn't want to play for you. Why are you holding him up and not letting him go anywhere?
Well, it's a hostage situation. That's what this is. People have been talking about, was there tampering? Is his reasoning good? It doesn't matter. The kid, it sucks. Was there tampering? Possibly, maybe even probably. But you can't hold him hostage. It doesn't matter. This is a free country. You should be able to just leave. You shouldn't have the right. Just because you can give this tremendous honor, and I mean, if you talk to Doug Gottlieb, the greatest honor any human can ever get of a college scholarship to Utah State University, but doesn't mean that you can just take it away and not let you get it anywhere else. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is. And the other thing is, Utah State, you're not going to win this. What is Utah State getting out of doing this other than making their recruiting a hell of a lot harder on their coaching staff?
Well, John, I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, I was just going to say, I understand Utah State's frustration. I get both sides of it. The timing was really bad. We're talking days before the season starts. He walks in and he announces his quitting. They probably felt like it couldn't have come at a more disruptive time. And I could see them saying, well, because you were a problem, because you didn't follow like team rules, we're not going to renew your. Well, and they didn't. They canceled his scholarship, and they're not giving him a release. I think the timing of it had a lot to do with it. Had this happened at the end of last season, or maybe even over the summer, I can't say for certain, but I think Utah State would have been less prone to pull this had it happened earlier.
So it's punitive damage for inconveniencing them.
That's one way of looking at it.
I mean, it's
Well, this is what happened with. I mean, Phil Martelli. John, you're being a Pennsylvania guy. Phil Martelli tried to do this a couple of years ago.
He succeeded.
Josh Pastner tried to do it with the Austin Nichols situation. Maybe if you succeed, or at least limit where the kid's going to go, you don't come out of this looking good. And this is a first-year coach, Tim Duria. This is not a guy who can withstand who has the legacy that a Phil Martelli already has.
Correct, but first of all, you'll never get me to say anything bad about former Arizona Wildcat Josh Pastner. Secondly, this is not about Utah State looking good. They were done wrong, and like David said, this was all about the timing. If he told them 6 months ago that he was planning to leave and everything, this would absolutely have been a completely different and non-story. He told them 2 days before the season opener, and they were harmed, and they were pissed, and they're taking it out on him unfairly, in my opinion, but that is the reason why. There were some allegations I read that the new coach, Verrier, actually a player had sucker punched somebody else in the back of the head, and that he kind of didn't address it as Collette thought he should have, and that maybe that's why Collette is coming out in the media and why this whole thing happened. But it's absolutely not about appearances. It's about you done me wrong, I'm going to do you wrong.
But is it even fair that they can do that? That the NCAA that allows schools to prevent people from transferring?
In my opinion, it's not. But I don't think it is, simply because no other extracurricular has that restriction. No other scholarship has that restriction. That's something that's completely unique to college athletics, and I don't think it's fair. And if you're trying to get in sync with the rest of the university and argue that this is an extension of the academic experience, then I think it needs to be in concert with everything else. And when you have that kind of power over somebody, it is not. But having said that, I almost, it's like Mercutio, a plague on both your houses. I really think he did this to sabotage Utah State. And I kind of think they're both wrong here, if that makes any sense.
Literally conscription is what they're claiming that a scholarship is. Like, the Army is the only other scenario in which this would happen, if you think about it, where you can't get out. Like, it's ridiculous. I totally agree that they're doing it because they felt harmed. I just don't care. The schools have every advantage over these kids in every single situation. That's why I don't care if they feel inconvenienced. You got to let them go.
Well, yeah, and Lee, just to follow up on that, the Army, and if you're employed by somebody, you have an employment contract that says you can't leave or you can't go somewhere else. You can't go and go work for a competitor for the next 10 years if you leave us. But guess what happens in both the Army and in the employment contract setting that does not happen in the NCAA? You're getting paid.
Yeah.
You know what?
A little bit of a deal.
Maybe if you're going to be able to hold these kids up from switching schools, maybe they should be paid.
Yeah, I don't care that they felt inconvenience. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what the timing is. You can't hold a kid hostage, period. And you're not going to benefit. Great, Utah State. You feel a little better screwing this kid over. That's a really fine advertisement for college athletics right there. Then isn't it? That's really, boy, I can't wait to have my kids try and get college scholarships. They can get punished because they felt done wrong, and you'll have no recourse. Give me a break. Get over Utah State. Get over yourselves. You didn't get over yourselves when Stu Morrill ran up 30-1 records against nobody and lost in the first round to 7 seeds. I'm not going to feel bad for you then. I don't feel bad for you now.
Let's move on from the Collette situation. One other issue I wanted to bring up here, Wichita State, heading into the season, was a team that people were talking about as a top 10 potential team, maybe even an outside Final Four type of caliber team. they are now sitting. They just spent this week finishing in 8th place in their exempt tournament, 0-3. Now they did not have Fred VanVleet. Anton Grady suffered what looked like a really scary injury. It looks like he's probably going to be okay, but they are being beaten up by injuries. But is Wichita State in trouble, or do you think that they're going to get some leeway for everything that's happened?
Well, yes, they're in trouble. They just finished. Yeah, I would qualify that as in trouble. Now, if they get back to full strength and they prove that they are a different team at full strength than they were without it, yes, they'll get some leeway. The Missouri Valley, not the best conference, but not the worst one either. It's it's full of snake pits, home court heroes, so to speak. If they go out there and they win a lot of games on the road, I think the committee will take that into account. But you can't write this off as saying that, oh, it doesn't. I think there's a difference between considering something and ignoring it entirely. Yeah, they're in trouble. They're in big trouble. This is not how you want to start off.
I mean, they got to win the Utah game on December 12th, right, at home. I mean, I was waiting for David to go, yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell when he started that response. But I don't know, John, what do you think? That Utah game looks like a must-win if they want to even attempt to be an at-large team, right?
Somewhat, but I don't think – I agree that it would certainly help for at-large purposes, no question. But this is a team that has made its hay by beating everybody in the Missouri Valley the last several years under Coach Marshall, and I think they're going to do that again. Van Vliet is literally an All-America caliber point guard. When you take him out of the equation, the team falls apart, unfortunately, as we've seen. Ron Baker's been playing great. Nobody else is even scoring 9 points a game. Baker can't do it by himself. The team is shooting under 38% from the field, amongst the bottom 50 in the nation. However, the losses, Tulsa, USC, Alabama, Iowa, all respectable. The only question is, if Van Vliet comes back and is not 100%, does this open the door for a team like Evansville or the worst 6-1 team in the country, Southern Illinois, to step in and steal the at-large bid?
It's interesting because you mentioned the offensive ratings, and they are pretty ugly. I mean, it's bad enough that Ron Baker is the 4th biggest user in that offense. That's a problem. That's a thing that shouldn't happen. It's worse that when Anton Grady, Ty Taylor, and Zach Brown ahead of him, their offensive ratings are 96.9, which is bad, 73.3, and 75.1, which is putrid. That's like an offensive rating in the low 70s. If you're also using most of the possessions, you're going to be a bad basketball team. So I'm concerned from them in terms of structure. Like you said, yeah, I mean, we have every piece of evidence that they can run through the Missouri Valley Conference in the past. They also have one Division I opponent that they've beaten, and it's Charleston Southern. And Division I might be the greatest compliment I've ever heard anyone pay that program. So, I mean, I agree with everything in terms of they could be okay, but, like, there's nothing for me right now to take the opinion that they're anything other than a tire fire. I mean, they're just a total mess. They're playing slow and bad on offense. That's the surprise to me, that they're playing so slow. I did not foresee that, to have Alabama and Iowa hold their offense down to such, that's kind of what shocked me more than almost anything else. I really thought Wichita State would benefit greatly from the rule changes. I did not foresee this. I mean, they'll right the ship because I do think they'll get more than one Division I win. It's hard. I hate doing this November 30th, but I think they might have to win the Missouri Valley. They're in so deep with these losses. I mean, Alabama, like, I kind of like USC, and we'll discuss how much I love Tulsa all of a sudden. But
Yes.
Alabama's pretty brutal.
Well, let's get right into some of these teams. What we want to do is run through some of these major conferences and some of the games that have been going on here. And let's start with in the ACC, where North Carolina. John, let me throw this over to you here. Did suffer the loss to Northern Iowa, but now Marcus Page will be back tomorrow night for the game against Maryland, and that's right in your neighborhood there. So I mean, is this? Maybe they'll throw it out there. What do you think about this game tomorrow night as well, and how good is Carolina going to be from here on out?
I think they'll be fine. Speaking of All-American point guards like Van Vliet, Marcus Page is certainly in that category, obviously. And they were able to go 6-1 without him, only lost by 4 points. Granted to Northern Iowa, who's not like a ranked team yet, but heading that direction. A huge stretch coming up for them. Maryland, Davidson, Texas in the next 12 days. We're really going to see what they're made of with Page. And once they get through that stretch, it's pretty smooth sailing for the rest of December. They have UCLA, which is never easy, but a bunch of mid-major at best teams before ACC play starts. So I think they can integrate Page back into the lineup, put him around all the big guys like Meeks, Bryce Johnson, Justin Jackson. I think they'll be just fine.
And let me throw it over to Lee because he's right up there on your screen. This Syracuse team that we kind of went to the season thinking it was a middle-of-the-pack team turns around and takes the battle for Atlanta's title, including beating some team from Connecticut. Is this a legitimate team this year from what we've seen now?
God, I hate you. No, yeah, I was impressed with them. I didn't think they were much of a team, and forget about beating UConn. I was just really impressed by the just stepping into it. And Tyler Lydon is legit offensively. I mean, he was the reason why they won the battle for Atlantis. He was spectacular offensively in the UConn game. The focus for them was going to be on Malachi Richardson, who is an excellent freshman, but that allowed Lydon to go a little under the radar. And they're not really using him that much on possessions, but I mean, offensively, he's been a star. I really think that going forward, you'll see Syracuse start to incorporate him a little more and incorporate Cooney a little less. And I really thought if this team was going to be any good, they were going to need to get more out of the freshman than Trevor Cooney because the freshmen are just more talented than Trevor Cooney. I mean, Lydon is 10 of 17 from 3. I don't know if he'll shoot 60% this year. I doubt it, but he's been very impressive from long range, and that's something that, that's a three-point threat that, Syracuse hasn't had in a few years. And I think it's something that really kind of did them in some scenarios. And right now they're a top 40 team in the country shooting from 3. So that totally changes the complexion for this, Syracuse team, which had a great week. They're getting a scholarship back because they're in a Power 5 conference, and that means that you get unfair amount of sympathy from the NCAA when you're a scumbag program like Syracuse is. Not that I'm bitter. They get a scholarship back the next 3 years, so that's huge for them recruiting. They had a great week winning the battle for Atlantis, getting the softest possible road to win it, and while UConn had to play 3 games in 36 hours and not playing Charlotte in one of them.
All right, so somebody's definitely bitter here.
Bitter.
David, let me throw it over to you here.
Seriously, I am impressed with Syracuse so far. I think they've gone from showing not only are they a tournament team, but they could be a team that can make a run to the second weekend. We'll see more from them this week. It's a big week for them. They got Wisconsin at home, and then the renewal of the rivalry at Georgetown. Another team I'm focusing on in the ACC who I don't despise with the Fire of 1,000 Suns, though, is Miami, who, John, you can talk about this team. They had the very tough buzzer beater loss at home to a game Northeastern team, but I'm incredibly impressed once again. Jim Larinaga, a team of his gets no love, and this team looks legit right now.
They did suffer the kind of a surprising home loss to Northeastern, but John, he threw it over to you, John T. So as I know that John Stalika has now joined us a little bit late, we'll get to him in a second. But John T., your thoughts on that Miami team that Lee just tossed to you?
Yeah, I like them a lot. I mean, I was very surprised by the loss to Northeastern just because they had steamrolled through Puerto Rico, Mississippi State, Utah, Butler, bam, 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 and then this not inexplicable loss, but surprising. The good news is the next 6 are winnable. Obviously, the Florida game next Tuesday is going to be huge, the big in-state rivalry. But besides that, pretty smooth sailing. And then they get an ACC play with the Orange on January 2nd. This team has a very good chance of being 11-1 by the end of December. So I think they're going to be okay under Larinaga.
David, we have 2 other undefeated teams in the AC we haven't gotten to yet. Louisville, who's 5-0 and cracked the top 25 today. Pittsburgh, who's 4.5-0. But your thoughts on these other ACC teams here and anything you've seen from them this past week?
Well, I like Louisville, but not because of their record. I think that if you combine Pitt and Louisville's records, minus the Gonzaga game, which apparently vanished from the earth, about 100 teams would be 9-0 against that schedule. Louisville blew out a pretty good North Florida team at home. I think I was impressed more of that than anything else. And I know that they just beat St. Louis. But St. Louis, while unbeaten going into that game, I'm still just not that impressed with them. They haven't really been tested yet. I don't know why Louisville, and Pitt's done this for years too, I don't know why that they're less prone to schedule a heavyweight out-of-conference game early. It seems like Pitino likes to ease into his season a little bit. But I think they're good, but not because of their record, because really how they've gone to the bakery for the most part.
I actually think in Louisville's case, don't underestimate the effect of those incredibly awful, as anyone could have predicted, bonds that exist on the arena in Louisville, which leads to them needing to pack the place with huge crowds, which means we're going to schedule Western Wisconsin as opposed to playing a road game at Texas because we need the gate. They need the funds to justify that building not completely shutting down. And I think that plays a role there for Louisville. For Pitt, it's just they never learn. And I mean, really, you guys don't think they have the 7th best offense in the country? You don't think maybe the soft schedule has a role in it? I mean, I cannot wait for – if Pitt loses the Purdue game in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, John, how insufferable is the Pitt whining going to be about the Gonzaga game, paying no attention to the fact that they are allowed to schedule 8 other out-of-conference games, any of which could have been against programs that have a clue.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing for me. If they don't win the Purdue game and they're whining about the Gonzaga game, nobody made you schedule Detroit. I mean, there are other teams in Michigan who are actually good at basketball. Michigan State, Michigan, Oakland, anybody else but Detroit, pretty much. Wayne State. I mean, Western Michigan.
Okay, let's. We do want to keep things moving here. Just wanted to throw out a couple teams here that I just want to quickly mention in the ACC. Also, Notre Dame, who heading into the season, I was not as high on as other people, kind of proved themselves this week, losing both to Alabama and to Monmouth. And a shout out to the Hawks, so we'll get to it in a few moments here. And Wake Forest is continuing to pick up wins, including the Indiana win, and doing this all without Cody Miller-McIntyre, their best player. He should be healthy in the next week or so, and I think we like this Wake Forest team heading into the season. I'm really starting to like them at this point.
I did not like them heading into the season. I like them now. I loved Notre Dame heading into the season. I do not like them now.
Fair enough. But let's move on to the Big East here. John Stalika joining us, John S.
Wow.
In perfect time to talk Big East hoops, and Xavier had a pretty good week last week.
Yeah, I'm glad that Time Warner's finally going to let me talk about it. And there's no truth to the rumor that I was celebrating with Monmouth's bench over the past 24 hours.
One of the greatest benches out there. But how about the Cygnus Xavier team, John? What did you see from them, John S., and give us a little report on their week?
Yeah, it was when we recorded last week, they were playing Northern Kentucky and just putting it on cruise control, so to speak, and Chris Mack didn't even show up for his post-game radio show, but did take enough time to light into his team, and whatever message they got in the locker room, it was received with flying colors. First win over Alabama, then they slaughtered USC, even if the score didn't reflect it, and just about everyone got in on the act last night when they waxed their former rival Dayton.
They've won 4 games away from home. This is a team that up until the end of February last year couldn't cross the street and beat anybody. All of them are pretty noteworthy. Michigan, well, Alabama maybe not so much. SC and Dayton, those are 4 decent wins away from home. I like Xavier a lot this year.
And they did this even with guys like Jalen Reynolds and James Farr in foul trouble for many of their tournament games.
And John T., Providence is a team that has really looked good, even though they did fall to Michigan State in that late game last night. Also, Villanova out to an undefeated start, but I think we're going to start learning about them over this next week, especially next Monday. But your thoughts on anybody else here in the Big East?
I'll go with Providence. I really thought this was Chris Dunn and a bunch of nobodies this year, and after they destroyed my Arizona Wildcats, which is going to help them so much in March, I have to give them props. Chris Dunn is a legitimate National Player of the Year candidate. His stats are crazy, offense and defense, and I think they're going to keep going good. I think they're going to be 12-1 by the end of December, and they got it's not just Dunn. They have Ben Bentel and Rodney Bullock. It's big power forwards who can score and defend and get in people's way. Like, this team is winning 20 games, and I think this team is making the NCAA tourney.
As long as they don't stumble against Brown or Boston College or any of the other cupcakes on their schedule.
I think the guy that really changes it for Providence so far has been Ryan Fazekas. I mean, he's a 6'8" freshman. He can stretch out. He can hit threes. He has a tremendous handle. He doesn't turn the ball over at all. I mean, for a freshman that hangs around the wing that much to be able to create this much offensively, I'm just really impressed. And like you said, I mean, I still think the team is about 85% Chris Dunn, but I think that's more because of how great Chris Dunn is rather than the team doesn't have anything, which is kind of what the situation was with LaDante Henton a couple of years ago. Chris Dunn is an absolute star, but he's also got pieces around him, and the tournament will be better to have him in it and Ben Simmons, and Henry Ellenson. But at this point, I'm starting to think that Dunn might be the only one we see in the tournament at the rate things are going.
And let's go right over to the Big Ten and the team that beat Providence last night, this Michigan State team. I'm going to admit that I was wrong about them heading into the season. I did not think that they would have enough this year, but wow, they looked good so far this year. David, your thoughts on this Michigan State team?
Yeah, on paper, and again, it's real early, but when you come just to what they've done as far as merit, I think they've done more than anybody. They have the win against Kansas, albeit I know Kansas wasn't quite at full strength. They beat a really good Providence team the other night. They won another game away from home in that tournament. I think that they've been as good as anybody, like, as far as what they've done up to this point. And what's interesting is with the new rules emphasis, I really thought Michigan State was going to suffer because they're such a physical team, but they've done it despite like the new emphasis on cutting down on physical play. So I'm even more impressed with that. I like them as much as I like anybody right now.
And you remember how last year Tom Izzo was basically apologizing in the preseason for the schedule not being their normal level? Well, this year they got back to it, a tough schedule, a tournament with a couple of really good teams. I mean, they didn't get to play Arizona, but they played a team that shut them down, and they were able to put a big run on them. And you could just say it, you could see it right now. We're talking about March. Neutral site wins over Kansas and Providence, and Wednesday night at home against Louisville for the Big Ten ACC Challenge. If they get those three, I mean, that's going to be really tough to beat that out if you're doing a comparison for seed lines. They've already got stuff in the bank that's going to pay so many dividends down the road in terms of seeding.
Agree.
Well,
I don't like Lee, but I agree with that.
Obviously, the huge game tomorrow night that we already just mentioned, John T., let me throw it over to you here for this. Two other teams, though, that are undefeated in the Big Ten, both this Maryland team who plays tomorrow night against Carolina and Purdue, who's at Pitt tomorrow night, and I guess that technically is a battle of undefeateds as well. Have you seen anything out of these two teams that you think that they're the best team in the Big Ten, or do you think Michigan State's the best team in the conference to date, or is it somebody else?
It's a toss-up between, I think, Michigan State and Maryland, although Purdue is obviously neck and neck, and if they can beat Pitt, then they certainly enter the conversation. Maryland has a very tough game against Carolina on Tuesday. After that, Spartans are the only ranked team they face until February. So even if they get tripped up by the Heels and or the Spartans, this team could win like 10 to 15 games in the next couple of months.
They could put up the W's. Lee, I gotta throw this over to you here. The Indiana Hoosiers. Did you see their two games? They're three. I guess all three of their games out in Maui. And what is wrong with Tom Crean's program?
God, everything. By the way, Maryland does play a certain program next Tuesday that might be ranked going into that game just based on other teams losing in front of them. They do play UConn at the Garden. So that's one more ranked team they would play in the next 2 months. One of them who won't be would be Indiana. Good Lord, it's bad. I mean, the win over St. John's was like a loss. They actually made St. John's look offensively competent. St. John's scored 73 points against the Hoosiers. Well, let me put it this way. St. John's allowed 93 points to Chaminade, and Indiana, with this big bad offense, managed only 83. They're bad. They're bad at basketball, and it's bad basketball. And the end of the UNLV-Indiana game, the Dave Rose, Tom Crean end-of-game situation conference that ensued was just a tribute to just a misuse of talent. Two coaches who don't know how to use a timeout, yet alone run a set play. The Wake Forest game, I like Wake Forest. I'm impressed by them. Wake Forest ran the same pick-and-roll play for their last 5 baskets, and Indiana looked like they'd never seen it before. I mean, this is a team that defensively is just lost. And I don't care how great they are offensively, and they're really good, but they're volume shooters. They're Carmelo Anthony. They don't play defense. They take a lot of shots. They turn the ball over a lot because they have it a lot, and they just don't care about the other end of the court. And it's why they're not going to win in the long run, just like Carmelo, said an angry Knicks fan. And now Wednesday night, they get to go into Cameron Indoor Stadium, and I think bad things are going to happen to them in that game. Very bad transition-y, give up 100 points with 5 minutes to go kind of things. This program is out of control. The buyout for Tom Crean is getting less obscene, but it's still a problem. He doesn't know how to teach defense. They just don't play defense. That's my summary to keep us at an hour. Indiana doesn't play defense, and their schedule remains a joke going forward. They're not Duke's their only. I mean, I guess Notre Dame obviously is a chance at a notable not home win, but like unless they win at Cameron Indoor, they're not going to have anything of note for a resume that's probably going to have a lot of conference losses on it.
John asked you to comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Lee mentioned Dave Rose, that's Indiana's first problem because he's BYU's coach.
Dave
not
Rice, I'm
UNLV's.
sorry.
Dave Wright, yeah, I caught that too.
No, Dave Rose is the good coach. I apologize.
Okay, but let me throw it over here to you, David. We talked about Michigan State, Maryland, and Purdue at the top of this conference. I'm not certain that anybody else in the entire league right now is looking like a tournament team with what's going on in Indiana. Things are bad in Wisconsin, and things are worse in Ohio State.
Yeah, and things are even. Well, don't forget Northwestern. I mean, this might be the year, I believe. But yeah, I mean, Wisconsin. I'm a little surprised that they're struggling this much. I know they lost a lot off of last year's team, but I still thought they'd be a top 25 team, if not a, And Ohio State, good God. It's inexplicable, and it isn't just that they haven't won big games; it's that they've lost to,
Texas Arlington,
who again went out and beat Memphis. But these are teams that weren't even expected to do well in your so-called under-the-radar conferences, yet they went in and beat Ohio State.
The last time Ohio State had a stretch that bad in the non-conference, they were 6-22 and on probation in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem, and once again, good thing UConn's out of conference schedule is heavily loaded with Big Ten teams this year. Oh God, but they got a shot tomorrow night if they can somehow beat Virginia at home. Maybe they right the ship because after that they get 2 games that should be easy wins with VMI and Air Force, and then their only true road non-conference game at Gampel Pavilion a week from Saturday. If they want to go into that game as anything other than cannon fodder, they gotta put a showing together tomorrow against Virginia. I'm not saying they gotta win, but this is a team who the numbers are all right, but I mean they're a terrible free throw team, and it's killed them in these games so far.
Let's move over to the Big 12. John T., let me bring you back in here. All the problems we just talked about in the Big 10, the Big 12 continues to look like the strongest conference in the country. Not only does Kansas win in Maui, you got 3 undefeated teams there in West Virginia, Iowa State, and Oklahoma. I mean, this could be a multiple top number 1 seed conference this year.
Yeah, they're stacked. I want to focus on Iowa State. I think they're going to be 7-0 by this time next week. Then they have a very tough stretch. 4 of their next 6. Iowa, Northern Iowa, Cincinnati, Oklahoma. we're gonna see exactly what this team is made of before Christmas. Because if they can hold their own against those good teams, then I think this is a Elite Eight team. If they get upset by Northern Iowa and have trouble with the others, this could be a one and done team in March.
David, let me throw the same conference over to you. Is there anybody else that you're focusing on early here? I know we've got a lot of big wins by a lot of teams here so far.
One of the teams that's impressed me that I wasn't that big on coming into the year is one that you mentioned, and that's West Virginia. I know that they don't have any big, huge wins, but they have a lot of smaller, they have a lot of impressive margins of victory against pretty decent teams. I think West Virginia is really good this year.
Yeah, I've watched them a little bit. The defense is legit. I mean, I know schedule plays a role, but the defense is legit. Classic Bob Huggins team, they're going to just be a nightmare inside. And I think in the Big 12, in a league that's got good big men like that conference does, I think that's going to carry them far. I've also been really impressed with West Virginia, and that's a team where I've watched them, and that's helped me go through is this just because they're playing Kennesaw State? No, I actually think they look pretty good. Now, the games aren't very watchable.
Those are good teams.
Yeah, but I mean, I watched a lot of the JMU game, and JMU is a decent team, and they really completely shut them down inside.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, that can take them far. I think that Texas will be interesting to watch this year. I don't know how good they'll be, but I just want to throw them out there because Tuesday night they get America's Darlings, the Mavericks of Texas Arlington, going for which for them would be the biggest scalp of them all. If they could get a win at Texas and be kings of the state system, we may never hear from Scott Schwartz again. That's basically it. Because they've already beaten Ohio State and Memphis, and tomorrow night they go into the Drum for what should be a really fun game to watch on the Longhorn Network. 5-1 UT Arlington against a Texas team trying to get under their legs under Shaka Smart. They're 2-3. The loss in the last game of the Battle for Atlantis against Michigan actually was probably the best they've looked, because Michigan's much better than Washington. Washington's awful. So maybe Texas is starting to figure it out.
Let me turn over to John T. again. I know that you've been dreading me coming to you with this question, but let's move over to the Pac-12, and I got to ask you, what's wrong with Arizona? Barely got by Santa Clara, then loses the Providence game. Is there something wrong here?
Not at all. I mean, it's a team in transition. They lost a ton of guys from last year. Brandon Ashley, Stanley Johnson, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, T.J. McConnell. You can't replace that overnight, even when you bring in McDonald's All-Americans like Alonzo Trier, who has been average at best, unfortunately. The loss to Providence by 4 points, but Chris Dunn-led possible tournament team on a neutral site is not the end of the world. This team is 6-1. If they get blown out at Gonzaga next Saturday, I'm still not going to push the panic button, but I'm going to start not thinking about the Sweet 16.
How about the Santa Clara game? That's what scared me. Even though they won the game on paper, that's what scared me a lot more than the Providence loss.
No, that's fair. They should be doing better than a 2-point overtime win against Santa Clara.
Against a winless Santa Clara team.
Hey, not anymore.
Okay.
Boy, did they take it out on Boston College. Oh, my God. God, that program isn't even worth the jokes anymore. But, John, to take it back to your boys, my advice, having seen my team play Gonzaga, is the three-point line will be somewhat relevant on both ends. Because Gonzaga can put them in, but I don't think enough credit's been given to – they're so long, they can cover the perimeter. I mean, it's insane. Between Sabonis, Karnowski, and Wiltshire, I mean, they don't even have to stand – what they got to stand? They can stand 5 feet inside the arc and still contest threes. And opponents – I mean, UConn was 1 for 11. That's why they lost the game. 2 for 12 forces overtime. That's going to be, I think, the real issue for Arizona, the struggle point in that game anyway. I'm rambling. But like you said, though, I'm not that worried about Arizona in terms of a neutral observer because the defense is there. And with the defense there, I think the offense is always the thing that takes longer to come in because as players have to get to know one another, the idea of working plays. I think Arizona will be fine. I think right now, not the worst thing in the world to happen, lose to a good Providence team, fly under the radar. They can put together a really good winning streak, even if it doesn't include the Gonzaga game. heading into Pac-12 play after that. I think they'll be fine.
Now, what about the status of what's his name, Tarczewski from Arizona?
John T.
I think I've not gotten the latest update. I think he should be okay. I mean, they have Ryan Anderson averaging a double-double, which pressure off, and they have Dusan Ristic as the backup worst-case scenario. He had a problem with his ankle. I don't think it's going to be that serious, so I'm not too worried about it.
Okay.
I'm not either.
David,
Mainly because I don't care.
David, when we're on the Pac-12, we've got a pair of teams here in Oregon and Washington State that are rolling up victories against, more or less against, well, at home at least. Oregon's actually played a few decent opponents, but has not left their interesting court there. Are these just teams that are just rolling up victories, or do we have something good here with either one of them?
I think we have something very good in Oregon, not so much with Wazoo, although they haven't lost yet. And again, it's legal out there, and just one of the characteristics is that you just don't want to get up off the couch and go anywhere. So, I mean, that explains all the home games.
And
John, I would suggest they find some, because Northern Arizona, Idaho State, the second best California Los Angeles public school in Los Angeles, and Texas Southern might not prepare them for Wednesday night against Gonzaga. That could be hide the children.
Yeah. Let me throw it over here to John S. Actually, this Cal team that people were pretty high on going into the season, but our concern was lack of depth, and they did not look good playing back-to-back nights, San Diego State and Richmond last week.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides of having a team with a lot of talented freshmen, that they're going to have their ups, but they'll also have some of their downs.
But their downs were pretty bad. Getting blown out by a San Diego State team that had looked very mediocre up until this point.
Yeah, and that was a San Diego State team that already dropped a game at home against Little Rock, but at least it was a nice rebound win for the Aztecs.
I think you nailed it. I don't think it's a question of talent. I think it's just a lack of depth. They just ran out of gas in both those games. I mean, San Diego State just really opened it up.
I mean, when has that sentence ever been a thing? Like, Quanzo Martin, here's a free tip. Tell Jaylen Brown and Jabari Bird to stop shooting threes. The two of them are 9 for 42. Just stop it. They need to stop it. They're 6'6" guys. They're wingmen. They need to attack the paint. That's been what's been killing this team, is they're just a terrible long-range shooting team, and they have the wrong guys taking the shots. It's just been a recipe for disaster in the two losses, but the schedule coming up is very, very favorable going into their tilt at Virginia on December 22nd. So Cal can get it turned around. Just real quick before we move on, Chad, you think UCLA's got a shot Thursday against Kentucky? You feeling that one? You think it'll be better than last year?
You just went to the team that I wanted to discuss, but it was not UCLA. It was Kentucky. It was Kentucky.
The good news for UCLA is it'd be hard to be worse than last year's game.
Yeah, but it could be just as bad, quite honestly. Kentucky continuing to roll, despite their best player, Tyler Ulis, being out with an injury. He missed the game tonight. They still were able to take care of a pretty good Illinois State team who hung in with them for a half, but that was it.
Does SC have anything this year before we switch over to Kentucky? Just yes or no? We don't want to.
South Carolina?
No, USC. It's literally their best start in 15 years. I want to at least give them a shout-out for that.
Yeah.
They're playing Andy Enfield's style, which is really entertaining, and has no defense whatsoever. So I don't know. I think they could be good if they're good. They're good because they're getting a 90th percentile outcome based on the rules tweaks. They're a team that's really going to benefit from freedom of movement and a shorter shot clock. They've already done it. They've been really impressive offensively. I don't know if I'm not ready to call them a tournament team yet, though. I mean, they haven't exactly played a tough schedule.
Well,
I also want to go back to Cal for a moment.
Okay.
Before they go to Virginia, I want to see how they do going from C level up to Club 7220 up in Wyoming.
Yes, sir! Nobody gets higher than the Wyoming Cowboys. Although some of the Washington teams might legally be able to challenge that.
Right. Yeah.
Let's move over to the SEC here. We briefly just mentioned this Kentucky team, obviously number one team in the nation, and I think deservedly so. But you've got another undefeated team here, David, in the South Carolina Gamecocks, coached by maybe not so angry Frank Martin. Still continuing to run here. Is this just a quirk of the schedule that you think they're going to fall down on, or they really don't have a tough game left until conference play?
Right. They kind of got out to a quick start last year. I don't know. Like, the schedule hasn't been tough, but it hasn't been easy either. Hofstra's decent but not good. Tulsa's decent but not good. Oral Roberts, again, decent but not good. So, I mean, they've beaten 3 decent teams. I'm willing to bet that, or conclude that South Carolina is decent but not good, and we might see them inside the bubble. They've been a lot better than I thought they would be, and Angry Frank has got it going there. I'm a little surprised that he hasn't gotten it turned around more quickly because he did so well at K-State, and I really do like him as a coach. He needs to control his temper. He gets a little angry, but you know, they're pretty. I think South Carolina is pretty decent.
And John T., this Texas A&M team was another team that we had a lot of questions about going into the season. Beats Texas and Gonzaga at the Battle for Atlantis before falling to Syracuse in the finals. Are they legitimate?
Anybody who beats Mark Few and Shaka Smart in back-to-back games is legitimate. That being said, like, they did stumble after that with the loss to Syracuse, only by 7 points. And they have some out-of-conference games that shouldn't be overwhelming: Arizona State, Kansas State. I think that getting Jalen Jones back from a 4-game suspension is key, although I still don't understand how he comes back and then they lose to Syracuse. Obviously just 1 game. They're very young, but they seem like they're for real, I think.
Well, how about a team that's not for real? John S., let me bring you in this year on this team here. LSU tonight was after already losing a couple games that they should have won. Last week, turns around and they were down, I think, 30 points to Charleston at one point. Tried to make a run in the second half, but it was just way too big of a deficit. Another ugly loss to a Charleston team that I think we had picked near the very bottom, if not at the bottom of the Colonial this season.
They got blasted by Charleston, huh? I didn't even notice this.
Yeah, they ended up with a 12-point game.
Well, let me go ahead.
Getting back to LSU, they also had a tough time up in Brooklyn, losing a pair of games there.
I mean,
they're not going to have too many opportunities to make it up before SEC play.
And they straight up blew the Marquette game. I mean, that was like, this is already Kevin Durant at Texas, but worse. Like, if you have Ben Simmons, I think the 4 of us could play with him, and we would at least be 4-2 at this point. I really do. Like, this is just such a Johnny Jones coaching malpractice. Already, I can just see the loss to Houston already coming down the pipe. Like, they're going to be 4-4 with the best freshman in a decade. I mean, it's got to be coaching. It's not hard. It's really not that hard to put players around a superstar like this kid. It can't be. You got him.
John T., a couple of teams in the SEC. Alabama picked up 2 wins in the Advocare. Vanderbilt made the finals in the Maui. We've got a couple of teams with only 1 loss, such as Florida and Auburn. What are your thoughts on the rest of the SEC here so far?
So I want to focus on Alabama real quick because I know that they've been kind of gotten some negative comments tonight, and I will say that is kind of correct. I wish Avery the best for the season there, and wins over Wichita State and Notre Dame were fantastic. However, I think it's smoke and mirrors right now. They only got 2 seniors. Their offense is way below average. They had the 105-point outing against Louisiana Lafayette. Everything else has been 80 or below. The defense is good, but I think this is smoke and mirrors. I do not think Alabama's making the tourney.
Let's move on to the American Athletic Conference. And before we get to Lee's team that he wants to discuss, 2 teams he wants to discuss.
Not really. I mean, one of them I'm kind of pissed at.
David, 3 undefeated teams here: Cincinnati, SMU, and Who else? Houston is undefeated, I believe.
Houston!
It's coming off May.
UConn's big rival, Houston.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Just like football. Just like...
Obviously, we don't like SMU's chances to make the tournament this year, but how about this Cincinnati team?
well, I like SMU's chances more than I like Boston College's, but I mean, I still don't think they're very good. Cincinnati, I like them a lot. They're in the rankings. I think they belong there. I know the majority of their schedule. They went to the bakery and got the pastry cart, but I think George Washington is legit, and I don't think they're as good as Virginia, but I think that they are a good team, and that the Virginia win was not just some flash in the pan. I expect them to have a big year, and Cincinnati beat them on a neutral court. I think this is a really good Cincinnati team. It wouldn't surprise me if they ended up 5-line, 4-line, or better. Like they have some other big out-of-conference games coming up. I think they got Xavier the week after next. That one's going to be fun.
They've also got Butler and Iowa State, so more meat and potatoes and not pastries there.
I really think that this is what you're saying. I think this is a criminally underrated Cincinnati team by nature of the conference, and like people, if they even want to say their recent NCAA history, it's actually not that bad. I mean, they've made Sweet 16 runs. I mean, they ran into Kentucky. I can't hold that against them. I mean, this is a team that's been building and building, and I think has really got the ability. I would not be shocked if they made a Final Four this year. I really wouldn't. The defense is. I'm not saying I'm picking them. I'm saying
write it down. November 30th, Lee is picking Cincinnati to make the Final Four.
To actually win the national championship. No, it's an elite defense.
Write it down.
They've got experience. They're a really, really good team. They're a little better than Houston, who's 4-0 right now, and 3 of the wins are over sub-335 teams. Not 300, sub-335. We're getting into the really smelly end of the diaper.
Lee, let me stick with you, though. For, Tulsa.
God.
Struggled,
yes.
I know you want to discuss them a little bit.
God, I love Tulsa.
Can we get this on the screen? Okay, anyway.
Do you have the email in front of you? I would like to know
What happened?
I would like to have a puppet reading the fine poetry communicated from the Tulsa University men's basketball account. It was as follows. A certain idiot public-facing, everybody is goody two-shoes and great, and I love all of these coaches giving me free swag, so I will constantly be on their side, named John Rothstein, tweeted, Arkansas Little Rock upsets Tulsa at Tulsa, which is a thing that happened, which was bad for Tulsa.
Yes.
It's all fun and games until somebody loses a bye game, which is one of his classic stupid milquetoast lines that he uses way too many times, like pretty much everything else John Rothstein says. Things such as tonight calling Illinois State like a solid team. Like, I'm sorry, no, Kentucky really should be beating them like the way they did. I know somebody said Illinois State's not bad, but come on. Let's be real here. By making that joke about fun and games until somebody loses a bye game, Tulsa's official account responded, all fun and games until you, all caps, ever, on all caps, tweet anything factual. 4-year series versus the Trojans, carry on. Which is just sublime. And, of course, then Rothstein goes on to talk about how unprofessional this tweet was. And as everyone responded, I mean, they were correct, though. Like, it literally is a 4-year series that's not a bye game. You were actually not correct there. And don't hide behind, there's no room for it. No, you got called out on something that was factually incorrect. Take your medicine, you putz. Take your medicine.
The only
back
disappointment...
to tweeting about the 15th best bakery on the Lower East Side and how Rutgers is definitely primed for a top 14 Big Ten finish and other crap that is only because you like getting along. Like, Rothstein is Dick Vitale, but way worse with the coach worship. Like, way worse. Because Dick Vitale won't randomly tweet about how, they need to give just a couple of more years at Wofford for their coach, or Furman for their coach, who I can't remember his name, but he's been there 15 years and has never won more than like 20 games. Like, stop. Have some standards. Have some standards. You got called out by Tulsa for a crap tweet. Don't whine that it was unprofessional.
Because
That's
what it lacked in
it.
professionalism, it made up for in awesomeness. It's just awesome. Anyway.
I mean, I don't know about
If you
John,
look at
but
my
my
screen, I think this is the one you're talking about.
It is indeed. My counter to that was a real lack of professionalism is claiming something's by game when it's a 4-year series. If anything, you should say, hey, why the fuck is Tulsa got a 4-year series with Arkansas Little Rock? Because to me, that's a very valid question. Very valid question.
Let's keep moving here. Let's move over to the Atlantic 10.
I'm a Tulsa fan, though.
Oh, God, I enjoyed that. Sorry, go on.
In the Atlantic
light
10,
a cigarette here.
Where Dayton did make the finals of the Advocare, George Washington is looking really good other than the loss to Cincinnati. John S., let me bring you in here, though, on this Davidson team, undefeated. And if you look at the RPI, which is meaningless right now, they are the number 1 team in the nation. Is this something we need to be looking at here for this team?
They did it.
Yeah, we'll ignore the fact that they beat Granville's finest team in the Denison Big Red over the weekend. A nice little Division III school just outside of Columbus.
And we got to throw some congratulations out to the head coach there at Davidson for picking up his 500th career win with that victory over Davidson.
It shouldn't count.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't count. It's Denison. You got to be. No, Bob McKillop, great guy. You got to go out and you got to beat Charlotte on the road to get it. If you don't get that, you got to win at North Carolina. That's it. I'm sorry. He has 499 wins.
But let's take a look here at the rest of the Atlantic 10. Let me throw it over to John T. again. John, anyone else you're looking at the Atlantic 10 that's impressed you so far?
I would say Dayton. They obviously got destroyed by Xavier, which I think arguably says more about Xavier than it does about Dayton. Huge test at Vandy next week. And this is a team playing without Bryce Pierre and has been very good. I think that Archie Miller deserves a whole bunch of credit as well.
Real quick, I think Will Wade deserves some love at VCU. I mean, the natural assumption was that, Shaka's gone. That'll be the end of it. They've looked good so far.
Yeah,
they played very well against Duke, and they're lost by 8. They lost by a point to Wisconsin, which, I mean, if you want to argue it's a bad loss, I mean, that's a bit extreme. But even though Wisconsin's down, I don't think there's any shame in that. VCU's 4-2. They've got a chance to beat Florida State on a neutral court coming up this weekend. They're right now the highest-rated KenPom team in the conference. Their tempo is still pretty high. They're still forcing, a lot of turnovers. They're forcing opponents to turn the ball over on over a quarter of all possessions. I think that – sorry, I just totally jumped in on John there, but I wanted to make sure this VCU team gets some love. Just because Shaka is gone doesn't mean this isn't still a good team.
Well, let me throw it back to John then on a game that I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night. Has a shot to be something a little crazy. Big 5 matchup. Villanova's at St. Joe's. St. Joe's team has looked pretty good so far, surprisingly so. And it is on St. Joe's at St. Joe's campus there, not at Villanova. Your thoughts on the St. Joe's team, and do you think they may have a shot tomorrow night?
Which John? Sorry.
You, John T. Yes,
I don't think they have a shot, but that's more because of Villanova than because of St. Joe's. Wildcats are winning by like 24 points a game. Their points allowed is like 53 points a game, is like top 3 in the nation. So as much as I respect Phil Martelli and love DeAndre Bembry, I think this is all about Villanova.
Let's move over very quickly to a conference that we've had a couple debates already this season, whether they even belong on this show or they should go over to the under the radar, and that's the Mountain West, which did have an undefeated team coming into tonight, but Fresno State finally fell, losing at Oregon. Is UNLV the best team in this conference right now? That's my question I'm going to throw out there.
Oh, God.
I realize that it's been a little weak, but what about Colorado State? I do kind of like what they've done this year.
They're defensively a sieve, and that's my issue with them. They're the flashing toy in the window this holiday season. If you watch Colorado State when they have the basketball, you're already trying to figure out how many fans they'll send to Houston for the Final Four.
And I can
when they
echo
don't
this.
have it, it's bad. It's
Lee,
real
I
bad.
watched the other night. I watched Colorado State's home game against Abilene Christian, who took them to
How many overtimes did they need?
double
in that one?
overtime with Abilene Christian, number 342 Ken Palm team. I have nothing more that I can say about Colorado State at the moment.
Do you think their non-conference schedule is bad, or it still has 2 non-D1 games left?
Okay.
Both.
They're playing. They still have to play Arkansas, Fort Smith, and Regis, which I actually think is a temp agency that is put together a basketball team for December 29th contest.
Well, just about everyone in the Mountain West probably has about 1 or 2 non-Div 1 games. It's not just a Colorado State thing.
There's 4 of them. 4 teams in the Mountain West. Their next game, 4 of them is against a non-D1 team. 4 of them.
Outrageous. Yeah, this is outrageous, especially with how many other teams play non-Div 1 games and then claim they can't get anybody to play them. There's an obvious solution to this problem. We've mentioned it many times. One of the things about the Mountain West is you have 4 teams with just 1 loss, and they're racking up bloated records against Utah State, Stu Morrill Utah State type of schedules. Is this going to help them out in the computers? You know, Air Force is 4-2, and one of the losses was to what I think is a pretty good Colorado team. How many teams can they land inside the bubble? Because whenever I've seen conferences try this, CUSA did this several times. It ultimately ends up not working because when you play that week of a schedule, when those out-of-conference teams get in the conference and lose, it kind of simultaneously sinks your RPI as you go through conference play.
Well, it's a big week for them. They've got UNLV hosting Oregon, a chance to maybe wave a banner, and I want to show some love for what I thought would be the worst team in the country. San Jose State's 3-3, ladies and gentlemen, which is amazing. They're 347th in offense. They're averaging fewer than 90 points per 100 possessions. But you know what? They're also playing 75 possessions a night. They're just chucking and ducking every night. And Wednesday night, the second best Antelopes in America come into San Jose State as they take on Antelope Valley. Which, it's not Go Lopes, #Lopes waiver, but they are Lopes nonetheless.
One other team we do want to discuss, a couple of teams we want to discuss tonight, but first of all, let's start with this Gonzaga team out of the West Coast Conference. Only 1 loss so far, the 1-point loss to A&M, but let me throw it over to John T. Is there something to be concerned about here with Gonzaga in the backcourt? Because they probably have the best front court in the entire country, but I'm not concerned that they have the guards there to carry them that deep this year.
It's a valid concern, but this is a 4-1 team with 1 loss by 1 point in a neutral game on Thanksgiving. I don't think they're too worried with Mark Few. Huge test on Saturday, hosting my Arizona Wildcats, who have been struggling, as we pointed out. So I think that is going to be the make-or-break game. Mark Few and Sean Miller generally acknowledged as the best coaches currently to not make the Final Four. I think the winner of that game has a decent chance, but the loser is going to have some problems.
I'm disappointed that we had that we can't get a Sean Miller game, but UConn and Arizona play next year. But about this Gonzaga team, the guards thing I think might be overblown just because where is it going to cost them? Defensively, I don't think it'll cost them because they have so much size in guys that can get out to the perimeter. And if those guys drive inside. I mean, there's 3 of them. There's 3 gigantic star front court players.
But
so
Lee, I thought the team kind of almost showed a lack of leadership, especially at the end of the A&M and the end of the UConn games.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they really tried to, they kind of fell apart at the end of both games. But, I mean, on the offensive end, they don't have to go through the guards. And on the defensive end, if you get one of the bigs to come help out on the perimeter, even if they drive right around them, which, I mean, UConn wasn't able to do, which is a team that should be able to do it, you've got other guys inside. So, I mean, in terms of hurting them, it shouldn't hurt them in the West Coast Conference. And in terms of March, I mean, Gonzaga's got a bit of no team's ever been happier to make the Elite Eight than Gonzaga was last year, just in terms of program mentality. It was so needed for them to just show they could get that far. But I think that's also the level at which it would really become a factor. And if we're talking about them in the Elite Eight, I mean, those are all really good teams at that point, you know. So I don't know. I think it's only a factor in terms of them winning a national championship. I don't think it will be the thing that keeps them out of a Final Four potentially.
Sorry, David, you had a point you wanted to make?
Oh no, I was just going to echo you. Like, it seems like that they sprinted out to big leads, and then they let Texas A&M back into it, and then they let UConn back into it. I just agreed with your point about the lack of leadership, but it's still November.
It is still November, and one team that has looked really good in November, even though they're more of an under-radar team, we wanted to give them a shout-out tonight. The Monmouth Hawks.
Yes.
Go 2-1 down there in Orlando, including beating Notre Dame with the program's first ever win over a nationally ranked program. They've also won at UCLA. They beat USC. Are we looking at a team here that should they more or less run the table to the conference finals and lose there is at large quality with these wins?
Yes. Well, I think so. Running the table to the conference final.
No, I mean, but when. To be fairly dominant, maybe lose only 2 or 3 times in conference. They've got a game at Georgetown, but that's only a really tough game left on the schedule.
Right. Well, there are a lot of uncertainties here. Well, first of all, how good is UCLA? How good is USC? And ultimately, how good is Notre Dame? But coming into the year, we believed at least 2 of those to be probable tournament teams. There are teams that land on the bubble or even inside of it that don't manage 2 wins against tournament teams away from home. They already have 2. The game against Dayton, which they had a shot at the buzzer to tie, was a real impressive showing, especially since they fell behind against a really good team and were able to fight their way back into it. I don't know. Sometimes this happens and it's an anomaly, and they might go 4-4 in their next 8 games, and by then they've kind of forgotten about them. But I really am legitimately impressed with this Monmouth team. If they are dominant, I definitely think you have to look at them. Another thing about them is just the sheer number of games they play away from home. That's always been a point of emphasis with the committee in recent years. I don't think it'll be as big with this year's committee just based on some of the changes that were made and some of the people that were left. Their first home game, December 13th. And I hope they sell it out.
And it's going to be a great crowd. And, Chad, let's be honest. Are the Monmouth Hawks the best team that will be coming into the Lewis Brown Athletic Center this year? I mean, the Big Ten isn't that great. Let's go, Monmouth. And, I mean, and to Mr. Title and Stalica, I mean, it's not just that they're winning, but the style on the bench. I mean, what is everybody's favorite celebration? I enjoyed the mimicking of the 3 going through the hoop. I don't know, John, Mr. Tight. We'll go with John T, and we'll work our way across. I mean, what a bench.
Yeah, I actually want to focus on the starter. If you haven't seen Justin Robinson, he's amazing. 5'8", 160. Has gotten better each of his first 2 years at Monmouth. He's exploding this year. 25 points a game, 3 steals a game. He's only missed 3 free throws all year. He's made 40 of 43. He's 5'8", and he's killing it for them, and he's going to help them win Metro Athletic, I think.
He's shooting 48% from 3. He's the Steph Curry of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference.
Well, let's run through a few of the games that are coming up this week real quick here. It is Big Ten ACC Challenge Week coming up Tuesday night. There's 6 games in the challenge: Michigan, NC State, Northwestern, Va Tech, Virginia, Ohio State, Purdue, Pitt, Miami, Nebraska, Maryland, North Carolina. Besides the Maryland, North Carolina, John S., what game do you look at most for tomorrow night's games there?
I don't know. I don't know if it's tomorrow night or Wednesday night, but if Michigan and NC State are playing each other,
that's tomorrow night. Yes.
There's a sense of urgency between those 2 teams right there. But I would probably give an edge to the Wolfpack if it's down in Raleigh.
And David, coming up on Wednesday night, the challenge concludes 6 more games.
Oh, does it ever?
We've got the late games: Indiana, Duke, Notre Dame at Illinois, Florida State at Iowa. The early games: Louisville at Michigan State and Wisconsin at Syracuse. Obviously, that Louisville-Michigan State game is the highlight game.
Yeah, and I think we're really going to learn something about Louisville. I am impressed with them, but this is a whole another level type of test. I'm not expecting them to win, but if they can go in there and play well, I'll feel a lot better about them. And again, yeah, Indiana at Duke. I think Indiana will be challenged. I think they will be.
Yeah,
I think it will be challenging.
And there's two more games that you're leaving out there.
Well, Lee, I wanted to throw one other game, the last game in the challenge to you because I know it's your favorite, the annual Penn State-Boston College game.
I'll tell you what, America, as a nation, you owe it to yourself to be. I'm assuming this is an ESPNU contest.
It is.
ESPN needs to boost the subscriber base, and I can't think of any better way than these two complete garbage fire train wrecks of programs that are just like Penn State's worse. Like, oh God, Penn State, they're a nightmare. At least Boston College has the excuse of being in the second year under a coach that we know isn't any good. Like, this is what, year 18 roughly of the show going, the dog and pony show at Penn State, known as the I'm trying to pull up the game to quit stalling here.
It's either Boston College or Georgia Tech.
The Pat Chambers experience, it's not off to a great start. Losing to Duquesne and Radford. Actually, let me rephrase that. Losing by 26 to Duquesne and by 12 at home to Radford. That
was a bigger than 12 point. They got blown. They were really got destroyed by Radford.
It was not good. And of course they beat DePaul by 6 because just DePaul, God. But no. Oh man, it's going to be a close game between two truly awful basketball teams. But the other one tomorrow night, Northwestern at Virginia Tech. Northwestern. If you want this to be the year, you can't lose this game. This has got to be a game you get, all right?
Let me say this as an old A-10 fan. How is Duquesne winning multiple games by 20-plus points against Penn State and Western Kentucky and still be completely under the radar?
How about this for a question? Penn State, free advice. I don't know. Maybe you try and hire Jim Ferry next time. Maybe just if you can't beat him, join him.
But a couple other games tomorrow night, actually, David. We mentioned the Cincinnati Butler game. Also, the Holy War, BYU at Utah.
Oh, love this game. It's not quite the same now that it's not a conference game because you don't have that storyline of first place on the line, and they don't play twice a year. And I just think that when a rivalry is no longer a conference game, some of the heat goes out of it. But this is still a great game. Was it last year or the year before there was talk of them not playing it anymore or not taking several years off? I know that they're not playing in football until I think is it 2018 or 2019. I'm glad they kept this going. This is a really good game. And on paper, it actually has some meaning. I think it's a game that they both kind of need because neither of them really have a really big win yet, especially BYU. But this is a fun one. I don't think it's not on the national radar the way Duke, North Carolina is, but this is a bitter rivalry.
I mean, it's literally based on taking shots at religion. If you haven't known someone who's affiliated with one of these schools, it's as personal as it gets. Like it's literally to the soul of the fan base's hatred. The question of the existence thereof, in fact. And just Thursday night, real quick, because we got to go speed round. Oh, the sexual action of the Sun Belt begins anew with Louisiana Lafayette traveling to Louisiana Monroe, a Louisiana Lafayette team that's 106 in KenPom, despite having 2 non-D1 wins and 2 D1 losses. So the Sun Belt gets back underway in earnest Thursday night. Conference play returns.
Let me just throw a few other games out here. Thursday night, that Kentucky-UCLA game we already mentioned. But John T., coming up Friday night at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, so not at UNLV's campus, Oregon and UNLV. I think that could be a real interesting game.
I mean, everything's interesting at the MGM Grand, I would argue. But yeah, I mean, UNLV is literally 2 points away from being undefeated. The Ducks are young, but they seem like they're for real. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup.
And just
Friday also sees the beginning of Metro Atlantic Conference play. Go ahead. Sorry.
A few of these conferences are kicking off some conference play early on.
The 20-game conferences.
But coming up over the weekend, just want to throw a few games out there. We mentioned some of them already, including the Syracuse-Georgetown game coming up. But coming up on Saturday, Temple at Wisconsin. William and Mary is at Virginia in an interesting game. Also at the Arizona-Gonzaga game we already talked about. Another regional rivalry, Oral Roberts at Tulsa.
That's actually got some meaning this year. I mean, it is a regional rivalry, but that's actually a game of note.
And a good road test late. Texas A&M is at Arizona State at the 10:30 game. Curtain of distraction against a A&M team that this could be a nice road win for them, even if Arizona State's not that good this year. But let me throw this over to you, David. Also coming up Saturday at noon, Grand Canyon at Louisville.
Oh, yes, the team of the people, the undefeated team of the people goes to Louisville, and this is the kind of win that can land you inside the bubble. Now, they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament yet, but the key word there is yet. We are going to get this waiver. We are going to Twitter bomb the NCAA. You can call. We're going to have more about this on Under the Radar later in the week. But we're going to have a full-blown plan in place to get Grand Canyon a waiver and get them to the NCAA tournament. And
Lopes waiver. Lopes waiver.
No
team in the country shoots worse at the line. Has their opponent shooting worse at the line than Grand Canyon.
Clearly, free throw defense.
It's Thunder Dan, the free throw defense, and the wild home atmosphere they've got. It's having a real impact at the GCU Arena. 7,000 a night. Lopes waiver. Let's go. NCAA.
Let's do it. Yes.
Come on.
Lee, I wanted to get your opinion on one other game coming up on Sunday. I just got moved from Saturday to Sunday. San Diego State and San Diego playing outside at Petco Park.
Well, I'll tell you something, folks. There is a 100% chance that something weather-related affects this game, even though it doesn't. Here's the thing. Like, the Padres usually have, like, rainy nights early in the season, early in the spring. Late fall, early winter, I mean, there could be moisture. This thing screams disaster. It's just, there's going to be a problem. It should be a really awesome sight and atmosphere that probably won't happen because some sort of entirely predictable marine layer-related weather catastrophe will affect the game. Although moisture, it would benefit San Diego State, right? I mean, there's nothing they want more than like actually throwing water on the court to slow the game down. I mean, it plays right into their hands, Toreros. You can't fall for it.
And let's not forget the occasional monsoon that the Chargers play during December as well.
Yeah, well, no, I think they need to move this game to Los Angeles. I think they need to just, in a preceding move to what's going to happen with the Chargers, they should move this game to the sports arena in Los Angeles in honor of the Clippers, really, who did the same thing. But no, I hope the game goes off. I want to see what this looks like. They played Davis Cup tennis there. They played golf there, and Petco Park now will host basketball. I think they may have – no, they weren't one of the venues that hosted WNBA games. They played it at Flushing Meadows. So, I mean, I hope they at least have the court covered, like with some sort of false canopy. But I don't have high expectations for the level of planning that these sort of stunts usually have. I don't know. John T., what sort of weather malady do you think we'll encounter this game?
I mean, I love San Diego as a place to visit. It's 72 and breezy 12 months a year, so I think...
Yes, except for the day when this game has to be played.
There are a couple other games I really just want to very quickly highlight here. Coming up Sunday night, Vanderbilt at Baylor should be a really good one.
Big one, resume builder.
And coming up next week on Monday, a new event, the Pearl Harbor Classic out in Hawaii. It's a doubleheader. The late game is Oregon and Navy, but the early game, Oklahoma and Villanova, a huge game coming up next Monday night.
And for the love of God, can they bring some dehumidifiers into the hangar? That's all I ask. Like, can we learn some lessons here?
But let's go. Let's run through here. We're just about done. We're just about out of time. Let's run through any final thoughts. Let me start with you, David.
All right. Well, I guess my biggest final thought is what a fun week it was this past week. It was one of the busiest weeks, and I think it's the week that we really learned the most about a lot of teams that we've seen, seen and heard about, but now they faced their first real tests. But the biggest thing that came out was how some of these dormant rivalries have been resurrected. Gonzaga, Washington, Syracuse, UConn, Texas A&M. And Xavier Dayton, and then even in the previous week, albeit not in an exempt tournament, but in the Dave Gaffett Classic, we saw Maryland and Georgetown. I really think, even just watching college basketball tonight, you see half-empty arenas, and you see you just don't see a high level of intrigue. I think we need these kinds of games to be regular games, and we need them either on campus or at neutral sites that are accessible to a large number of fans, not in hotel ballrooms that are converted or in theme parks. I think Lee's with me on this. We talked about this briefly at the end of last year. November and December needs more heat. It needs more energy. And more needs to be done and it really comes down to the schools. Like, the reason these schools don't play is because one or both of them just decide that they don't want to play regularly. I think the sport needs games like this to regularly happen throughout November and December. We need these games, and we need them on campus.
Yeah, well, at least we're getting that with Syracuse and Georgetown. But
Yeah.
like you said, we're getting games that are good enough. It's just they're being played in the worst places. Like, I mean, a hotel ballroom that seats 2,000 or the Carrier Dome. Like, it would have been easier for UConn to win in the ballroom, but it would have been a much cooler thing for the sport at the Carrier Dome.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, John? John S., let's start with you.
We talk about the rivalry games, but sometimes we don't talk about the letdown or the hangover for the following game. Dayton is going to be playing North Florida this weekend. That's good for their schedule and the RPI, but the timing of it makes this game a little bit dicey, especially with their following game being at Vanderbilt, which is never easy.
And John T., your thoughts?
Well, as much as I want to comment on the undefeated possible matchup next week of Xavier and Cincinnati, I'll defer to my colleague next week on that. Yours truly will be missing out on the Arizona-Gonzaga Game of the Year.
Oh.
We traveled to scenic Eagle Bank Arena in Fairfax, Virginia, to watch his Penn Quakers take on George Mason on Saturday night. So hopefully I'm making the right choice, but I'm not 100% sure.
I really almost highlighted that game, but I remembered that they no longer have Paul Hewitt, so it's not as funny.
Yeah, sorry, Lee, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this week we see the first game of something that I think is really awesome. Credit to Bryce Drew and to the often mentioned Rick Byrd. Valparaiso hosts Belmont on Thursday night. These two strong mid-major teams, they're actually playing home and away this year. I think this is really cool with the downfall of the Bracket Busters event. I mean, these are two teams that are going to be around the top 100 in most of the rankings, and they're playing home and away. The game is Thursday night at Belmont, and then they play Monday, December 28th, at Valparaiso. So, I mean, I think it's really cool that these two programs are being really serious about making sure they don't have to win either the Horizon League or the Ohio Valley, and making sure they can be legitimate contenders to possibly be an at-large team. And you see it in the way that they schedule to a degree. I mean, Valparaiso, did you have to play Indiana Kokomo and Trinity Christian? Yeah, I mean, one wasn't enough, non-D1. And as for Belmont, I mean, Kennesaw State's the only sub-300 out-of-conference game they're playing. Ouachita Baptist seemed unnecessary. But other than that, Belmont and Valparaiso, they got together, they did what David was talking about. It's not a rivalry game, but they realized it's a mutually beneficial series to play each other, and I think it's really awesome that these games are happening, and they won't get a lot of attention now, but they will have huge ramifications in the computer rankings in the months to come, should one of them sweep the two games.
And let me throw out my final thoughts, kind of echoing what John S. said about mentioning North Florida earlier, a game that may be worth watching here Wednesday night. North Florida is going to be at LSU. This LSU team is heading such the wrong direction. This could be a blowout, and not the blowout that many people would have thought heading into the season.
It's hard to head much farther south than than Baton Rouge or closer to the water, but God knows Johnny Jones is trying, and the lesson is never try.
But for myself, Lee Del Vecchio, John Teitel, John Salika, and David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks again for joining us, everybody, and we'll talk to you again real soon.